Good morning, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. I'm Esi. I'm the host here at the Voice of Hope Media. This is a rebroadcast of an episode which we've already done before, which is um, which is one that was done on International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities. So during this edition, we will present to you one of our guest speakers, Esi Hardy, who wasn't available on the day we had the show on the 4th of December, but we had a recorded episode. So we decided to broadcast it today. So during this episode, she will be sharing her experiences as a person living with a disability and um, how the pandemic affected her, how she was affected during the lockdown and her mental health. And thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry I can't come live video because obvious reasons I've got problems with my eyes. So we are going to have it this way. So stay tuned and welcome once more. You are welcome once more. If you're just joining in, I am AC. I'm your host. And if you're new to our show, to our program, this is the Voice of Hope Media, and a program which was created as a safe space to give a voice to those emotional, to those sensitive, to those topics which we all think they are still taboo topics and they are too sensitive to be talked about in public. So we give a voice to these issues and in order to empower others to be able to speak up, to speak out, knowing they will be heard and they won't be judged or stigmatized. So we empower, we educate, we motivate, we give a voice, and we inspire those who have faced challenging and complex life issues, including special educational needs. So normally we have these episodes of Let's Give It a Voice on Saturdays at 5 p.m. But because our Saturday was Christmas Day, so we couldn't be having a live show on that day. So welcome once more. I am going to dive in straight away to share uh, our broadcast with you. So stay tuned and watch. If you have any questions, please just put them down. Or if you have particular questions to ask um Essie, please go ahead and do. She will be able to answer you, especially on our YouTube channel. So we are watching live on YouTube channel and on our Facebook
Hello,
page.
everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Give It a Voice here at the Voice of Hope Media with A. Simbeng. This episode is a recorded episode of International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities with our guest speaker, Esi Hardy. Our show, which is on the International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities, with the theme Living with Disabilities in the Pandemic, its effect on our mental health, and also some disabilities are invisible. So this show is scheduled for the 4th of December in celebration of the International Day of Persons Living with Disability. So today we have a recorded episode because our guest speaker is not going to be available on the 4th of December. As a parent of a child living with disabilities, I know firsthand that persons with are one of the most excluded groups in our society. And also, they are among the hardest hit in this pandemic. They have been affected in various ways, especially their mental health has been affected. They have felt isolated as well. So this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation with those who have life experiences with disabilities, for us to tell us how they've managed, how they coped during that period, and what advice they will give to other people who are still struggling, especially with the upcoming of the Omicron variant of the COVID virus. So I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, and this episode, as I say, is a recorded episode. So our speaker today is Esi Hardy. So I will just introduce her in a few seconds. Thank you. Hi, Esi, and you are welcome.
Thank
Hi,
you for
you
having
are
me.
welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our speaker today and for agreeing to this recorded episode because you're not going to be available on Saturday. So you are welcome. I'll just let you to speak. Introduce yourself. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and then we continue our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. So my name's Essie Hardy, and I am a physically disabled person. So I call myself a hybrid wheelchair user, because I use my wheelchair part time, and I also walk part time as well. I have a disability called cerebral palsy, and I run my own business called Celebrating Disability, which provides training, event speaking, consultancy, and auditing for businesses wanting to create an inclusive culture that's inclusive of disabled people.
All right. Thank you so much, Essie. As you've all said, Essie is an individual who lives with physical disabilities. So you've gone through the pandemic. We all have. And I know many people have been hard hit. How was life for you during the lockdown?
It's interesting. So I'm a very kind of independent person. I'm proud to be single. So at the beginning of lockdown, I didn't really see an issue at all because I was like, woohoo! I just get to spend more time on my own doing what I want to do, and I don't have to go outside. But as lockdown continued, I realized it got more difficult. I suddenly, kind of out of nowhere, got knocked down with depression and anxiety. And depression and anxiety is something that I'd never ever faced in my life up until that point. And it knocked me for six. Really, really, for me, it was really debilitating. All of a sudden, I couldn't make a decision for myself. I couldn't stop worrying about what people thought, about how I'd said something, if I'd offended people. It was really terrible. And I think probably a few things brought it on, but I think one of the major things that brought it on was the government's representation of how they talked about disabled people, or how they didn't talk and consider disabled people in their efforts to support people through the pandemic and through the lockdown.
Yeah.
And the more I kind of talk to my disabled colleagues and my disabled friends, and the more we kind of shared stories about not just what was going on in the pandemic for us, but what kind of new policies, in terms of kind of the landscape of the built environment, the government was planning in the future for disabled people, the more I felt that I was not considered, and not valued as a member of society. And I think that that's one of the things that really did kind of um, affect my mental health quite a lot in the pandemic. And then at the beginning of the new year in 2000, it all seems a blur now, doesn't it? I think in the beginning of this year, 2021,
Mhm.
in January, my personal assistant or care worker, so the person that comes in to support me to do the things I can't do myself, had COVID, got knocked down with COVID. So her daughter is, and was at the time and is still now, one of my personal assistants. And because they were related, neither of them could come into work. And obviously, I was also isolating because I'd been exposed. And because I was isolating, and because none of my usual PAs could come into work, I had to I couldn't contact any of my spare kind of standby bank PAs because of the situation that we were in. So I contacted my local authority and said, I need emergency care support because of this situation. And they said, no, you're not our responsibility. And I said, well, yes, I am.
Oh.
Because luckily I know quite a lot about kind of the Care Act and how social care and support is meant to work in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Yeah.
able to say, yes, I am. You can sort it out right now. And they made it really, really difficult for me to just have the basic support that I needed. I had to threaten to go to the papers for them just to send somebody out to help me to bed. And then the next day, when they called me back to organise kind of more long-term emergency support, because I was going to need support for at least 10 days, if not 3 weeks, they again made it really difficult by every time I told them what support I need, essentially saying that I probably didn't need that support. So, for example, I said, I need somebody for 2 hours every evening. And they said, why do you need somebody for 2 hours? And I said, well, because I need to have a shower. Why do you need to have a shower? Why do you need to have a shower every day? And questions like that, because I can self-advocate for myself, and I got my confidence back. So by this time, my depression and anxiety had lifted, and I was back to my normal kind of self-advocating self. I was able to say, well, it's a basic right for me to be clean. This is ridiculous that you're asking me these questions. But I know that many disabled people cannot self-advocate for themselves because they might not have the vocabulary to articulate, they might not understand their rights, and they might not be confident enough. So from that set of circumstances, I was in a fortunate position. But I think a lot of the time local authorities rely on people not to know their rights or not to feel confident to assert their rights in order to save money and save resources.
Yeah. Which is an absolute shame for that to be happening, given that they are already aware of your needs and what really has to be done. So that was a real shame. But what I've picked up from what you said is being aware is of absolute importance. And when you've got a disability, it's also important to self advocate, to be yourself, to be an advocate for your own self. So which means you are quite knowledgeable about what you are doing. And then with that particular experience, and you also mentioned that there are other people out there who maybe are not as confident as you were, or are not as knowledgeable as you are about the care needs, about the Care Act, etc. So what would you advise them? What would be your advice for these people who are not aware or who are not confident enough to speak up or to speak out?
I think when people, I think a lot of people who aren't aware are people who are maybe older people. So you have disabled people that have support from the system, but you also have older people that are coming into it for the first time in their 70s and 80s perhaps, and their families are taking care of them and doing this all for them. I would say to either that disabled person, that older person, or that older person's family, and that disabled person's family to find as much reliable information as possible. And I say reliable deliberately because a lot of people deliberately and not purposefully give unreliable or inaccurate information. So go to a reliable source, like something like the CRB, the Citizens CAB, sorry, the Citizens
Yeah.
Advice Bureau, peer support, where other disabled people or other families of disabled people have the same thing, or somebody else that they feel that they can rely on, or even just Google it themselves on the internet, on the local authority websites, even kind of Googling Care Act 2014 legislation and responsibilities, to really find what their rights are. And it's really hard to kind of tell somebody to be confident. I would never say be confident, because it's a
No.
personal thing. You know, if you're not confident, you're not confident. But if you don't feel as though you can self-advocate, you don't have the confidence to do that, find the people that you trust that can support you to do that. And I'd always suggest maybe taking somebody into a meeting with you, so there's another person to hear the information, writing everything down beforehand, so that when somebody comes to visit you, you're not flustered, and that even if there's lots of information going on, you can look at your bullet points or your notes and think, okay, this is where I am. Ask people to slow down and repeat themselves. Make sure that by the time the person leaves the meeting, you know everything that they've said. So if you think that you haven't understood something that somebody said, ask them to repeat themselves, and to tell you in a different way. Give examples. You know, I always say to people, can you give me a tangible example that I can relate to? Because sometimes when things are so unrelatable, it's really hard to kind of grasp hold of what it means.
Yeah.
And ask them to write it down. Ask them to write it down in the meeting for you. So somebody, when you could say to somebody, can you make notes for me? And they say, oh yes, no, I'll send them to you in a couple of days. And then things happen and they don't. And by the time they send it to you, you've forgotten everything and the notes don't make sense. So ask them to write it down whilst they're with you in that meeting. You have every right to ask if you can record the conversation. So, I mean, I do that quite often because I can't write notes. So I say, I'm just going to press record on this conversation. This is just so that I can remember what I need to remember. It's not for me to share anywhere else. And only if somebody is very unreasonable would they say no. But if they say no, say, okay, cool, can you take the notes that I need down for me right now? And then the person has a choice as well. And make sure the person in the room with you is the person that you want to be in the room, not just the only person available, and the person that you feel will help you give the information that you want to give, not from your point of view, not from their point of view. So yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant. So it's absolutely necessary to have someone with you, or to ask. It's generally ask for help. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to have somebody with you, because I don't like people with me. I like to do it myself because I want to feel as though I'm in control, and I feel that I am confident enough to be able to articulate the things away. So I'm not saying it's necessary to have somebody with you, but you can have somebody with you if you want to, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for emphasizing on that. You mentioned about your struggle with depression and anxiety during that period, and that was your very first time. How did you cope?
How did I cope? That's a very good question. I love, I was so lucky that I had really lovely people around me that were really understanding. So my PAs that were with me at the time were really, really kind of supportive throughout that whole thing. Because I think that their role changed quite dramatically in that time period. So usually I am a very decisive, accurate, I can provide a lot of clarity. I know what I want and I know how I want it. But in those months, I was the complete opposite of that, so literally the other end of the spectrum. That's where I was. And so I think that my PA's roles changed dramatically because they were the ones that were having to make decisions for me. What would you like for supper? I say, oh, I don't know. And they were having to choose all these basic things that usually would be really easy decisions for me, as well as reassuring me that I hadn't offended them every 5 minutes by breathing the wrong way and things like that. And so, and they were really supportive. They gave me all the time that I needed. They bought me flowers, really lovely. I remember one day, one of my PAs turned up out of the blue with a bunch of flowers for me just to make me feel better, which is so lovely. But as well as my PAs, my friends and my family, obviously my friends couldn't be with me because we were in a lockdown, but they'd send me little messages going, hello, my friend. And they were just little reminders that people were thinking about me all the time. And I was calling, when I called my friends up in tears, they had all the time in the world for me. And it was just, I felt really, really lucky to have the friendships I had.
Wow, that's brilliant. Yeah, and when someone is struggling with depression or with anxiety, sometimes the only medication you need is a supportive environment, friends, families, and sometimes you may not necessarily need the doctor or any form of medication. So your family and your friends were quite helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, I think a really, really important thing to note is that for me, it was a very, it was a short intervention of depression and anxiety. I think it lasted for about 3.5 months. And many people
Okay.
live with depression and anxiety for years and years. And so, in no way that am I trying to compare somebody's experience of long-term depression and anxiety to my short-term experience. And I think, for me, I went on medication, but I'm laughing because I just think it's quite ironic. But I went on medication. I can't remember what it was called, but it's not important. But it actually affected my cerebral palsy. So when I took medication, I went into the most outrageous spasm. So all of my body seized up and tensed up, and I was like within block for about 6 hours. I couldn't move, and I was so uncomfortable. And then, I tried it again the next day. When it happened exactly again, and then I to a doctor who actually understood about depression and anxiety and also cerebral palsy. So she was able to offer me medication that actually supported me, and supported where I was rather than a bog standard one that you give to everybody. And I think that's really helpful as well. I think in the medical generally, I mean, not all, but generally doctors very much stick to the medical model of disability, as in there's a problem.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and thank you for joining in. So if you have any question, just put them down here. Esi will answer them later. Then let's just have a quick break, and then we'll be back. Thank you, Dad, and welcome back.
with you, we need to fix you. But everybody is kind of, we categorize everybody. Whereas what I needed and what everybody needed is an individual approach, that takes into account your personality, your situation at the time, and also
Yeah.
disabilities.
Okay. That was brilliant. And yeah, is there any other thing you would like to add to our conversation? Because it was just a short, recorded conversation, so we can broadcast on Saturday with the rest of the guest speakers. So, oh, I just remembered over the news this morning there was a lot said about a shortage in PAs. Did you hear?
I didn't
Yeah.
hear. No, I didn't hear this morning.
Yeah, it was said on I think it was on BBC One this morning that there's a shortage of PAs. I wonder what that is, what the reason may be. Maybe there's a high demand of PAs. Oh yeah.
I mean, there's always been a high demand of PAs, and there always will be, and
Mm-hmm.
the demand is only going to grow as PAs in care are more well known. But I think as well, Brexit had a huge impact on care workers and personal assistants.
Oh,
Where,
yeah.
historically, when I used to advertise for personal assistants, I would get I would recruit, I would get lots of people interested from places like South Africa and Zimbabwe
Mm-hmm.
and all over Europe, and now and New Zealand and Australia. And now none of that exists because it's a lot harder to get into the country. And
Yeah.
also makes people from foreign countries feel very unwelcome and unvalued when, the government is essentially saying, well, you're not welcome here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think, this is all contributing to the lack of PAs, the shortage of PAs. Also, the pay that personal assistants and care generally receive is really bad. And that's not really anything to do with disabled people, because of disabled people who have to get their money from the local authority, which is
Yeah.
called, can sometimes be called a direct payment, to pay for your
Okay.
care. The local authority give you that budget, and so you're stuck with the budget that you're given. And so it might be more lucrative to go and work in Aldi, for example, than it is to work in care. And if your first experience of care is in, let's say, a care home or a domiciliary
Mm-hmm.
care service, then all you hear is, oh, it's terrible working privately in care because you don't get paid properly and you have to be self-employed. So there's a lot of inaccurate information about being a personal assistant in care, which turns
Mm-hmm.
people away. And there's not any real training for personal assistants in care either. So
That's
it's
true.
not like there has to be standard training that every disabled person, as well as every care worker, has to go through. So for somebody coming into care for the first time, if they don't know about private care, it seems a much more sensible solution to go to a care home or a domiciliary care service. But actually working privately in care is more money for the care worker, and also better hours, more flexible hours, and you can develop those
Yeah.
relationships as well.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Which is what many people do not really know, and probably that's why they they, they scare away. And maybe some are actually afraid that because they have to be employed privately, they are afraid of job security as well.
Yeah,
Or
well,
what do you
absolutely.
think?
But, you could argue that that's the same case in a care home or in a domiciliary care service, because a
Mm-hmm.
domiciliary care service quite often employs people on 0-hour contracts. So at any
Mm-hmm.
moment, that organization, that company could say, I don't want you next week, and you don't have any work. Whereas a disabled person is less likely to say, I don't want you next week, because we always need
Yeah,
care.
always need people. And
Yeah.
What about people who are struggling to get PAs? What could you advise them? Where could they go to 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 look for PAs, or is it just advertising?
I think it's just advertising, and I also think it depends on where you live. So,
Mm,
for example, there's a really good Facebook group, and it's called "Carers Only, No Agencies Allowed," or "No
okay.
Businesses Allowed," and I really recommend people go on there. It's got over, I think it's got over 5,000 people on it. But it seems
Mm-hmm.
to work better in the north of the country than it does in the south of the country. I
Okay.
advertise on Facebook, just put an advert out on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
in my local village community page, and
Okay.
surrounding community pages as well. Indeed.com is also quite good, or indeed.co.uk. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people employ via word of mouth. So I know somebody, a disabled person, who has never had to advertise because it's always
Wow.
been through word of mouth. So her PAs stay a long time, and when
Mm,
they hand in the notice, she says, "Oh, do you know anyone else?" And they always know 4 or 5 other
they bring-
people to recommend. So some people are
mhm.
really lucky like that. Also, I used
Okay.
to use a website called Gumtree, which
Yeah.
is really good as well, or used to
Mm,
be really good when I used it as well. And
okay.
I have in the past advertised in my local newspaper as well, so like the local gazettes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on this recorded conversation. If there's any final thing you would like to say before we go, and then this will be broadcast on Saturday.
No, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for having me, AC. I mean, what I'd
Okay.
say about International Women's Day and all of these kind of awareness days, they're really great. But what we need to do is keep up the momentum throughout the year. Disabled
Yeah.
people, for example, are disabled 365 days a year, not just on the 3rd of December. And, for Disability History Month. So keeping up the
Yeah.
momentum and supporting each other, being really good allies, and also as disabled people finding the support we need from our peer support groups is
Mhm.
really important all the time.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I absolutely love the fact that you mentioned that disabled people live the experience 365 days a year, not just on the 3rd of December. And I usually say that for every other awareness days. So it is 365 days a year. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this conversation. So you take care for now. Bye bye.
And you, bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was a recorded program that was done on the 3rd of December. So I just thought we are still in December and it's almost going to be the end of December. And the 3rd of December worldwide is celebrated as International Day of Persons Living with a Disability. So we couldn't really end this December without broadcasting this episode. I hope and I pray that you must have learned one or two new things from it. I usually say during our show here in the Voice of Hope Media, we learn, we unlearn, and we relearn. During every episode, you must have learned one new thing. And if you have, let us know what you've learned. If you have questions, send us your questions. And the beginning of new year, we will be having brand new shows with different people, with many more people. We have a lot planned for you in store. So another thing is if you are interested, if you are watching and you are interested in being a sponsor of our talk show, let us know. Get in touch and let us discuss. If you want to be part of the team of the Voice of Hope Media, get in touch. Let's discuss. If you also want to be a host or you have a burning topic that you would like to talk about and you want to host it here over at the Voice of Hope Media, you to get in touch as well. And if you want to be a guest speaker and you want me to host you, also let us know. Get in touch and we will talk about it and agree on what to do. Also, we help at the Voice of Hope Media. Some of the services we provide are we help people to host their own webinars, to host their own shows. So if you have a platform and you have a show that you want to host, but you the host are not available, or you want someone to put the topic together and break it down, maybe into days, into weeks. That's something we can do here at the Voice of Hope Media. So you let us know, just get in touch, you let us know, and let's see how we can go about it. So if you're new here once more, this is the Voice of Hope Media. It's actually an umbrella organization created to give a voice to those taboo topics, those issues which many people think they are too emotional, they are too sensitive to be talked about in public. But here at the Voice of Hope Media, we give a voice to these issues to empower, to inspire, to educate, to give hope to people facing challenging and complex life issues, and also to empower you to be able to speak up, speak out, knowing you will be heard and you won't be judged or stigmatized. One good thing is that every experience that you faced in life is worthy, it's valuable, and it has the power to transform your lives only if you give it a voice. So, what do we say? It's a Merry Christmas. Here today is considered as the official Boxing Day um, here in the UK. So we are still on holiday today. And it's also a Monday. It's the last Monday of December. So, and interestingly, I will be coming back live here later. I don't know the time yet, later for our Monday motivation edition. So stay tuned, stay blessed, and I hope you have a great start of the year, or you have a great end of the year. We hope all your wishes, all your prayers, and all your dreams, we pray they come true the start of the new year. But stay tuned for our Monday motivation coming up in the next couple of hours. Bye for now.